Hi, I'm Tanic Sims 2, but you can call me Tanny, and welcome to the 5th installment of the Sims 2 Corruption Chronicles. A few of you guys said in How Corrupt is Strangetown Anyway that you couldn't wait for the Veronaville video, so your wish is my command, here it is. Like always, I'm going to cover pretty much everything I could find about Veronaville, from the well-known to the more obscure problems. If there's anything I've missed, however, or if there's just something you'd like me to cover in the future, please let me know down in the comments. By now I'm sure you know how these videos work, but just in case this is your first time, hood corruption is when data specific to a neighbourhood is not assigned correctly, leading to the game getting confused and trying to point to invalid or missing references. All the hoods that ship with the game, particularly the 3 from the base game including Veronaville, come pre-corrupted due to errors and oversights made in development, as well as overall flaws within the game's spaghetti coding. This series hopes to go as in-depth as possible about what's wrong with each pre-made hood, and what you as a player can do about them. Alright, so that being said, let's just dive straight in. Today's destination is, of course, Veronaville. As usual, we will begin with the ghosts of Veronaville. Because Veronaville was one of the 3 hoods shipped before University, the expansion pack that introduced Resurrection, the usual suspects are all here. Most dead Sims have incomplete or no character data because they were never intended to be played, with the exception of most of the Cap and Monty ancestors. Excluding Hero and other distant ancestors, a few ancestral Sims, namely the Summer Dreams and the Gossamers, are missing graves because they were given death tokens instead of being killed off properly, leading to them having shredded character data files. But much like Strangetown, these missing graves are the least of Veronaville's problems when it comes to the dead, and having a grave is unfortunately not always an indication of complete character data either. Though having a grave means in-game resurrection may be possible, many dead Sims in Veronaville have blank personalities, including all the Cap ancestors except Contessa Cap, Priam Albion, and Queen and Eastern Thebe, all Monty ancestors except Claudio, Olivia, and Hero, and all Summer Dream ancestors except Sprite Gossamer and Bob Bramble. A few are also missing data for interest, so those will be randomized upon resurrection. It is of course advised none of the Veronaville ancestors are resurrected, however, regardless of how intact their character files may seem. For example, Caliban and his wife Cordelia Cap have corrupted faces, similar to some of the deceased Sims in Olive's Garden. Their eyebrows are missing and their eyes are brown despite the fact they should have green and grey respectively. This is because their face data had gotten corrupted, leading to their eyes resorting to the default texture that is painted on their skin tone. As a result, upon resurrection, Caliban's appearance will be randomized. Though his face won't become glitchy like some Sims in Strangetown, it will change to a template that perhaps better reflects his intended appearance after a player changes his appearance in the mirror. Also note the low resolution of Caliban's thumbnail. This will become important later. Likewise, Cordelia's appearance will be different than what is shown in her thumbnail, namely she will be wearing makeup when resurrected. However, it seems that her facial corruption was actually fixed sometime in development. The Sims Wiki speculates this based on the fact she has a hidden thumbnail of her as an elder in her character file, which may show her original appearance. On the topic of Caliban Cap, something extremely odd about him is that he has a physical dead token just chilling in his inventory. The dead token, or I am dead token, is a hidden memory all deceased Sims should have, so the game is able to recognize them as being dead. But tokens are hidden memories, not actual objects. Having a physical version in his inventory prevents Caliban from being properly resurrected. Since his character file is not unlinked, he should actually be straightforward to resurrect, once you remove the dead token that is. Cordelia has the same problem. A few other ancestors also have buggy dead tokens. Consort Cap's ancestors Ishan, Queen, and Andromache Thebe, as well as Priam Albion, will all fade away seconds after appearing, but may become permanently stuck in the household. This sometimes causes a glitch, where other Sims in the household are unable to move out, and the safest fix is to remove them from the household via SimPE. This may have been fixed with the Ultimate Collection since everything worked fine for me, however I decided to include it anyway because it has caused problems for players in the past, and there's always a possibility that some of you may be playing with different or older versions of The Sims 2. Plus, it is important to test these glitches because there are a lot of misconceptions and outdated information floating around that needs dispelling and clarifications. Major shout out to Harrison for reminding me about this because I very nearly forgot to include it. While there may not be one definitive answer as to why the 3 base game hoods are so broken, if there were then well this series wouldn't be necessary, a good place to start understanding why there are so many problems, especially in Veronaville and Strangetown, would be to examine how much or possibly even how little was updated prior to the game's release. Let's use Priam Albion as an example. The Sims wiki states that his face's shape will change if aged to a younger life stage. Priam does not use a broken face template however, and the wiki acknowledges these changes are not significant enough to come from a different template. Thus, the wiki concludes that this might be a result of numerous changes Max has made to the Sims data during development. So what does this mean? These constant changes in development should indicate that Max did update Veronaville and polish it before releasing the game, but perhaps the problems lie in all the elements that weren't updated. Take a look at this walkthrough of The Sims 2 Will Wright did for E3 back in May 2004, about 4 months before the game was released. Notice how there are 4 neighbourhoods available at this stage of development, the first 3 of course being the hoods eventually shipped with the game. In this demonstration, Will Wright uses the scrap neighbourhood Waterside to showcase cool new features such as family trees, birthday parties, and gossip, as well as the role of memories in shaping a Sim's life. Though Waterside did not make the final cut of the game, some Sims were reused for another neighbourhood that does come with the game, Pleasantview. Don Baxter became the Lothario we all know and probably despise, while his lover Dina became, well, Dina Caliente. Thus, it can be assumed that Pleasantview was the most recently updated of the 3 hoods, hence why Pleasantview is still not in the best shape, but it's definitely a lot less broken compared to Strangetown and Veronaville. This theory is further supported by the fact that Don, Dina and Nina are mentioned as being new arrivals to Pleasantview. You may also be able to tell the UI in these pre-release images are a lot closer to that of the final game, especially compared to beta pictures of Strangetown. So what does this have to do with Veronaville? Reddit user Jaceu noted that some of the pre-made Sims character files contain version information when opened in SimPE. This string likely refers to the version of the game they were last saved in. For reference, Jaceu believes the final or RTM version of the game is 100913. Though reports that Pleasantview Sims like Mortimer Goth and some playable Sims from Strangetown and Veronaville have the later number 100917. According to these numbers, ancestor Hamlet Dane was one of the very first saved Sims with the version number 0140735. Meaning he existed before many Pleasantview and Strangetown ancestors and even the tutorial NPCs. Veronaville townies and NPCs all have the version number 100883, the same as tutorial Sims Joe and Jane, though Jaceu notes that the last non-townie Sims to be created in Veronaville were last saved in version 0140863, an early version of the game, and a few playable Sims in Veronaville were last updated in the RTM version. This seems to be the case for all the base game hoods, as well as the objects.package file however. Please keep in mind that this is not confirmed and most of all does not prove which of the 3 hoods was created first, nor does it definitively prove that that Veronaville was never updated at all before the game was released, hence its issues. If anything, this information mostly suggests that the 3 hoods were created at the same time, though the level of upkeep may vary. It can, however, offer some insight into the development process of the base game hoods, and potentially help piece together missing parts of the Sims 2 corruption puzzle. Another interesting detail I noticed was that Contessa Cap is referred to as N005, user 00001 in her object data. Other examples include Hidden Darlene from Pleasantview, who's N014, user 00016, and Hidden Nervous in Strangetown, who's N010, user 00016, as well as some other ancestral Sims across all 3 base game hoods. Turns out there are a total of 40 neighbourhoods referenced in the game files, including duplicates of the 3 base game hoods. Pleasantview is N014, Strangetown N010, and Veronaville N005, matching these Sims' object data. The Veronaville we know now as the 3rd neighbourhood also was not always N003. This neighbourhood ID once belonged to Pleasantville, presumably an early version of Pleasantview. It's also believed that Veronaville was once called Europa, and the flyby for Europa that can still be enabled by naming a neighbourhood Europa does not perfectly work with Veronaville's terrain, meaning Veronaville might have gone through a lot of modifications before its final design was fixed. Point is though, Contessa's object data still referencing Veronaville's former neighbourhood ID is yet another scrap of outdated data left over from the development stages. Remember how I mentioned the low resolution of Caliban Cap's thumbnail? This is also the case for a few playable Sims portraits in Strangetown, notably Rip Grunt and Johnny Smith. Consort Cap also has a low-resolution thumbnail of himself as an adult in his character file, despite being an elder in the final game. Curiously, this is also the image shown in the Sim browser. Even though 2004 feels like it was basically yesterday and not 17 whole years ago, it goes without saying that computers were not as capable as they are now when Maxis were developing The Sims 2. A lot of features like rain had to be scrapped from the base game because of graphical limitations, and similarly, it's possible that developers might have had to run the game on the lowest settings, especially in the earlier stages. This could explain why some Sims like Caliban have low quality thumbnails, because they were last saved or updated in an older version of the game. This is purely speculative, however, as version information is absent from Caliban's character file. I must stress that these low quality thumbnails are not corruption per se, and only mentioned because they may lend further evidence to the theory that outdated data and broken references to data that no longer exists in the released game may be a key reason as to why these hoods are a bit wonky. As mentioned in the Strangetown video, the power aspiration was a scrapped aspiration not included in the released game, though some of its coding can still be found in the game files. It is speculated to be a sort of hybrid between popularity and fortune. There are 5 ancestral Sims in Veronaville who have the power aspiration. Julius Caesar, Stefano Arlecchino, Momentila Bramble, Judith Dottore, and Hamlet Dane Sr. What's unique about these Sims is that they actually were intended to have this aspiration, and the data for it simply was never removed or updated because they weren't supposed to be played with. Though there are other Sims who are reported to have the power aspiration, these 5 Sims in Veronaville are actually the only ones who properly have it. This is proven by the invisible grow-up aspiration token in their inventories. The grow-up aspiration, the default for children and younger, replaced the power aspiration in the release game. Moreover, these 5 Sims share the same aspiration value, 8, which belongs to the power aspiration. For reference, grow-up has an aspiration value of 64. In comparison, deceased Strangetown Sims such as Canute Futa, Melissa Sims, and Patrick Jones, among others, have an aspiration value of 0. Essentially, they don't have an aspiration. I should have made this clearer in the Strangetown video, but to clarify, there are no Sims outside of Veronaville with the power aspiration, at least not intentionally, although it appears that either the game will try to read their missing aspiration as power, or no aspiration is treated similarly to having the power aspiration by the game due to incomplete coding. In short, several dead Sims as well as some universal NPCs are widely considered as having the power aspiration, when actually they just have no aspiration due to corrupted, missing, or incomplete character data. Of these 5 power Sims, only Julius Caesar can be resurrected because his character file is not unlinked. He will have no aspiration icon, no lifetime want, and he will always be at the level Dirty Old Woman, the moniker representing the low red aspiration level for elder romance Sims, despite not being a woman. If a player tries setting his aspiration to power with the Sim modder, nothing will happen because, well, that's his aspiration already. Just an interesting tidbit, judging by the zodiac signs of the 5 power Sims, it seems that Gemini and Sagittarius were originally intended to align with the power aspiration. Following the not quite so complete removal of the power aspiration, Gemini now correlates to fortune, while Sagittarius is assigned to knowledge Sims in the Maxis zodiac aspiration system. Perhaps this could explain how another Veronaville ancestor, Calpurnia Caesar, has a hidden grow-up aspiration token in her character file. When clicked on in SimPE, the power aspiration is referenced in the name of the memory, just like the 5 confirmed power Sims. Calpurnia is a Gemini, however she has the romance aspiration. Personally, I believe Calpurnia having this token is similar to how some living and even a few dead Sims in Pleasantview and Strangetown have hidden aspiration tokens. For example, family Sim Coral Oldie has a hidden popularity token, and even child Sims such as Alexander Goff and Jill Smith have hidden aspiration tokens. This is also the case for several Veronaville ancestors, including Calpurnia and Claudio Monty, a fortune Sim with a hidden knowledge aspiration token, among quite a few others. These hidden aspiration tokens seem to operate similarly to secondary aspirations, although of course those were not available until one of the last expansion packs, Free Time. It's just interesting how Calpurnia has a hidden aspiration token for power, but perhaps it's not quite the weirdest thing about her. Perhaps the greatest example of how arbitrary, or maybe even disturbing, your mileage may vary, corruption can be is that of Veronaville ancestors Calpurnia Caesar and Cleopatra Caps. Unfortunate genetics. Much like how some deceased Sims in Strangetown get deformed faces after changing their appearance in the mirror multiple times, these 2 ladies have their own quirks when it comes to their corrupted face data, again most likely due to changes during development. However, unlike the Sims in Strangetown, Calpurnia and Cleopatra's character files are not unlinked, meaning they can be easily resurrected with in-game tools such as the Resurrect Onomatron. Players definitely must have been in for a shock once University was released, rushing over to Veronaville to try out this cool new resurrection feature for the first time. It's me, I'm Players. If Calpurnia and Cleopatra are resurrected, their appearance will seem normal. However, once they are aged down to adults, they suddenly grow a pretty impressive saber tooth. This glitchy, elongated tooth is likely to be part of their mouths, especially since they will permanently hold their mouths in an open smile as adults. While this does look odd and kinda dangerous, the weirdness doesn't stop there. Now you've aged Cleopatra and Calpurnia down to adults, although for some reason they'll both retain grey hair, you might be curious as to what their children might look like. Will they inherit their spiky tooth? Spoiler, yes. But once again, the weirdness doesn't stop there. If either Cleopatra or Calpurnia have a son, any inherited features won't be visible. If they have a daughter, however, aside from inheriting very strong facial features, she also won't look anything out of the ordinary until she reaches adulthood. To prepare you for what you're about to see, let's just say Calpurnia and Cleopatra's DNA certainly isn't kidding when it lists mouth and jaw under dominant facial features. As well as inheriting the elongated tooth, their daughter's mouth will also be on her forehead. Why? Because strong corruption inhabits their frail blood, I guess. Calipers and Tongs made a great video about the forehead mouth phenomenon if you're interested, though I'm not sure why you would be in seeing more of this horror. The lore of Veronaville revolves around the feud between the Caps and the Montys, which unfortunately seems to have resulted in a few fatalities. Among the casualties is Olivia Monty, the mother of Romeo and Mercutio. The circumstances of her death become even more tragic when you learn that Olivia was actually in her 3rd trimester when she died, meaning Romeo and Mercutio not only lost both their parents, but an unborn sibling too. Her bio reads, "While Olivia loves her children and always wanted a big family, will her next birth push her over the edge?" But the thing is, Olivia's not pregnant. Though she will wear maternity clothing and waddle like a pregnant sim, this is simply a mesh. No matter how long a player waits, Olivia will never go into labour. This is because she is missing the pregnancy controller in her character data. The pregnancy controller is similar to hidden tokens such as I am dead token that indicates to the game that a sim is pregnant. The base game ships with 2 sims who are already pregnant, Brandy Broke in Pleasantview and Pascal Curious in Strangetown, and both of these sims have the invisible pregnancy controller, so their pregnancies should progress as normal until they give birth, when they will lose the controller. Though she may not actually be pregnant when resurrected, nothing weird will happen if a player decides to have her try for a baby for real, and she should have a normal pregnancy. The fact that Olivia isn't really pregnant isn't totally corruption per se, but it is a well-known bug, or maybe even feature, so I decided to mention it anyway. In a way, it's similar to how allowing Brandy's pregnancy to come to term won't cause corruption, but it is significant in the conversation of data loss in the development stages. Olivia has a bio, as mentioned earlier, which is incredibly rare for deceased sims, and from these pre-release images, it could suggest that she had once been intended to be playable. She was also created with the living members of her family, which is noteworthy because deceased ancestors and premade hoods are typically created afterwards, and both Benedict and Beatrice recognise her as being their auntie, despite the fact Olivia is a relative by marriage, and in The Sims 2, marriage is literally based on till death us do part. Claudio and Olivia won't be married anymore when resurrected, but they will still consider one another family, similar to Michael Batchelor and Dina Caliente. So while it's not totally accurate to say her pregnancy or lack thereof is due to her never being intended to be played, the fact that she could not be resurrected in the base game could possibly explain why she wasn't given a proper pregnancy. And as heartbreaking as this detail may be, it could have just been for storytelling purposes. Or maybe it was just too much for the teen rating. What do you think? Bug or feature? One of The Sims 2's biggest USPs was the inclusion of genetics and the new emphasis on creating families who could actually be related to one another. And what better way to showcase these new features than with a neighbourhood dedicated to a Shakespeare-inspired feud between 2 large families. The family trees of Veronaville are so tall that they span up to 5 generations at the start of the game, meaning the ancestry of the youngest generation can be traced back to their great-grandparents. Despite the fact that, in theory, Veronaville should be a great demonstration of genetics in The Sims 2, there is, as you may have guessed, a catch. I don't just mean the overall wonkiness and discrepancies of the Veronaville residents' DNA, however. While that is interesting and could probably warrant its own video, it's not exactly related to corruption. What I mean is that, much like Strangetown, most Sims in Veronaville are missing parts of their DNA. And much like Strangetown, this missing DNA string is for skin tone passed on. Once again, much like Strangetown, it would be quicker to list the Sims who aren't missing the skin tone string. These are Bottom Summer Dream, Kent Cat, Bianca Monty, and Oberon Summer Dream. Based on what we covered earlier about Veronaville undergoing a ton of changes in development, it doesn't seem like a coincidence that these were the last playable Sims created in Veronaville. Likewise, the possibly once playable ancestors such as Caliban Cap or Olivia Monty are also missing the skin tone string, since they were created so early on. Whereas the always intended to be deceased ancestors who were created last have a complete set of DNA, as do all townies and NPCs. At the risk of sounding repetitive, The Sims 2 underwent a lot of changes in development, and this includes both the CAS and DNA engines. The 3 base game hoods would have been created in an alpha build of the game, therefore the majority of playable Sims would have been created and even last updated in different CAS engines that may have both included and excluded certain coding from the RTM CAS engine. But what effect will this missing DNA string have in-game? Well, much like Strangetown, players reported Veronaville Sims with skin tone 1, for example, giving birth to babies with skin tone 4. This was the default skin tone the game would resort to when it was unable to find the correct genetic data. Additionally, both the Sims Wiki and Veronaville expert Corny Regans on Tumblr report that 3 Sims, namely Contessa, Jonorel, and Hal Cap, used to have an unrecognized skin tone when viewed in SimPE. This not only means these Sims' offsprings might be born with the default skin tone 4, but apparently also that the baby could inherit any skin tone even if it doesn't make genetic sense. The main issue, however, was more to do with crashes when a Sim with missing or unrecognized skin tone genetics would give birth, and the game would struggle to assign a skin tone to the baby. Thankfully, and unlike pretty much all the other entries in this list, this problem was soon patched with the Uni/Nightlife patch. Despite the fact that these Sims will still have the skin tone passed on string appear as blank in SimPE, the additional skin tone range in a Sim's DNA most likely resolved the problem of Sims missing the skin tone string, leading to the game failing to assign a genetically appropriate skin tone to their children. So, much like Strangetown, even though the MIA DNA was officially patched, I decided to include this information anyway, because it offers some insight into how broken and incomplete Veronaville was when The Sims 2 dropped. It's also just a neat history lesson. Something that wasn't corrected, however, was the fact that all the Sims in Veronaville consider one another as relatives. This isn't just referring to the fact that the hood only consists of 3 families, and thus gets interrelated after just 1 generation though. What I mean is that, according to SimPE, all Sims are flagged as family. Some players speculate that this was intentional on Max's part, to prevent the feuding families, the Caps and the Montys, from autonomously pursuing each other. However, this is unlikely because it's also the case for Strangetown, where everyone thinks they're related to some random ancestors or townies, and then Sims who actually are, or rather should be related, don't recognise each other as family there. Go figure. Also keep in mind that SimPE is a fan-made program, made to access and edit the game's package files, and the developers would have had much more advanced tools, so SimPE is just the closest us mere players can get to the game files. Still though, SimPE is our best resource when it comes to interpreting these files. Anyway, these false family flags shouldn't actually affect gameplay, because family ties are stored in 2 separate places: family ties and sim relations. These resources need to agree with one another before family ties can be properly set in game. In other words, these Sims, let's use Hermia Cap and Puck Summer Dream as examples, may have the family box checked in the sim relations resource, but they won't show up in the family ties resource because their relationship hasn't been fully set as family. SimPE would refer to their relationship as not defined or unknown, meaning they don't have specific family labels like, say, sibling for the game to interpret, and thus won't appear in one another's family tree, nor recognise one another as family in-game. So don't feel too weird if you fulfill Puck's wish of having his first kiss with Hermia. These erroneous flags in an already very related neighbourhood would be weird on their own, but this is only the surface of odd, incorrect, and most of all dangling family ties in Veronaville. Though it's likely Maxis deleted Sims across the 3 base game hoods at various stages of development, Veronaville has the most evidence proving Sims were deleted. A total of 19 character files, neighbour IDs or NIDs, the unique number used to represent each Sim in a neighbourhood, are missing from the characters folder, though it's estimated that at least 50, if not more, Sims were deleted in Veronaville, so newly generated Sims such as NPCs may have taken the neighbour ID that once belonged to a now deleted Sim. It also seems that the upwards of 50 deleted Sims were deleted somewhat differently to how the majority of the ancestors in the base game hoods were. Their character data may have been shredded and unlinked as a result, leading to a tiny file in the neighbourhood characters folder and an inability to be resurrected. However, they do still exist in the game in some capacity, if only via memories or their greyed out portraits in their descendants' family trees. This is not the case for Sims who were intended to be fully removed from the hood. Although we now know that deleting Sims is a very bad thing, or VBT, it's entirely possible that Maxis never playtested the pre-made hoods long enough for symptoms of corruption to manifest. They were under pressure from EA to reach deadlines. Plus, the tricky thing about corruption is its unpredictability. The results of hood corruption can take years to show, and even then, they may only culminate in hiccups that both players and developers may write off as normal bugs and glitches. Unfortunately, it was the players who found out the hard way how harmful deleting Sims can be. Just to clarify, deleting a Sim in this context refers to using the in-game delete family tool, or deleting files in the neighbourhood characters folder. Using move objects or pressing delete on a forced error is safe because they only remove an instance of the Sim from a lot and don't touch the Sim's actual character file. The in-game deletion tool, which was never patched out for some reason, is flawed in that it cannot and will not remove a Sim entirely, leaving scraps of their shredded data floating around the hood in the form of family ties, wants and fears, and memories trying to point to a Sim who no longer exists. The same goes for deleting Sims externally by deleting their files from the characters folder. Sim data and references are stored in different places, namely the character file itself and the actual neighbourhood.package file as a whole, as well as potentially other places in the game code that not even SimPE or programmers such as Mutilda are able to access. So retroactively cleaning surface references that are accessible, such as sim relations after deleting a sim, would only be superficial and not touch the source code, where more sim data may be stored. As such, only deleting from one location leaves the neighbourhood with half a sim, thus corrupting it because the neighbourhood now contains missing data the game will still try to reference since the data was not fully purged from the hood. Essentially, the data is broken, but the game won't recognize this and still attempt to reference or call on now shredded data. As stated, deleting a sim does not sever family ties and relationships with existing sims, meaning these ties are corrupted because they point to data that no longer exists, yet wasn't completely removed. In terms of Veronaville, a few playable sims have relationships and family ties with unknown sims. These are most likely sims who were deleted. Benedict and Beatrice Monty both recognise an unknown sim as their parent. This could be an early version of Hero Monty, since Antonio also recognises an unknown sim as his spouse. On the subject of Benedict and weird family ties, he recognises Hamlet Dane Sr. as his grandfather in sim relations, even though Hamlet is an ancestor of Cornwall Cat. Titania, Oberon, and Puck Summerdream have bad blood with unknown sims, potentially the same sim, which is odd considering the Summerdream family's neutrality. Plus, Puck recognises an unknown sim as his child, which is interesting seeing as he's a teenager. Hermia Cap especially has quite a few links to unknown sims she recognises as parents, siblings, and aunts or uncles, so it's possible a lot of the deleted sims were former carnations of Cat family members. Out of all the unknown sims Hermia recognises as her aunt or uncle, perhaps one may have been an early version of Kent Cap. The Sims Wiki states that the original Kent Cap sim relations and family ties are still intact, which could explain Hermia's relation to some unknown sims. Plus, Titania has a high lifetime relationship with an unknown sim that could have once been the sim formerly known as Kent Cap, since Titania and Kent are friends at the start of the game, with Titania even having a crush on him, which might line up with this high relationship, although the value for daily relationship is a bit too low for friendship or crush. Additionally, despite being a member of a very close and established family, Kent has no memories of his family and only has some basic cast memories, as well as a few grew up well memories. These These bare-bone memories could suggest Kent was deleted and later recreated, which would also explain why Kent was created much later than the rest of his family. The greatest evidence pointing to this theory is that NID 24 is missing, the file directly between Cornwall and Hermia Cap. If Kent was always intended to live with his sister Regan and brother-in-law Cornwall, he would most likely have this NID. Earlier I referred to NIDs as being unique. This isn't totally accurate, however. A major problem with improperly deleting Sims is that the game will not check if a neighbour ID has been used before, thus making it up for grabs for any newly created Sim. Since the Sim's data won't be completely cleaned due to its storage in separate locations, references such as their Sim wants and fears will still exist and be linked to the previous owner of that NID, leading to typical corruption symptoms such as toddlers having lifetime wants or Sims wanting to flirt with dogs. These junk data are why deleting a Sim, even if they're straight out of cast and never given the chance to integrate into a hood, is still unsafe. Though they may not have met anyone in the hood, the problem of dangling data, such as wants and fears, still remains. And because the game can't register if a neighbour ID has been used before, the number and all its remaining unclean shreds of data still clinging onto the neighbour ID could attach themselves to a newly created, born or generated Sim. I created a new Sim in Veronaville to test this, and sure enough, instead of taking the latest number after the last created Sim in the neighbourhood, my Sim snapped up the first available NID, 8, in the middle of the Cap family. This is also why a stray dog has taken what may have once been Kent Cap's NID. There is some indication that other deleted Sims NIDs were overwritten by newly generated Sims, such as NPCs. Seth Bowie is a repairman who has the lowest instance number in the neighbourhood, which is pretty uncommon for an NPC. The Sim with the lowest instance number in a hood will appear at the top of the Sim browser and, if playable and old enough, will be the designated telescope pusher. The Sims wiki states that the lot data for 111 Stratford Street, or lot 45, contains a file indicating the Sim Seth overwrote was called Viola. However, I was unable to verify this because the wiki wasn't specific about which file this was, and I was unable to access files like Sim information that may hold this data. Still, there is circumstantial evidence that supports this theory. This pre-release photo showing Olivia, Mercutio, and an unknown teenage girl was taken at 111 Stratford Street, plus SimPE lists over 400 Sim relations on this lot, indicating it may have once been occupied. Based on the fact that the Sims wiki mentions Seth being called Viola in a previous life, could this beta image depict a Viola Monty? Moreover, Seth's NID is 18, between Olivia and Romeo Monty. Was Viola supposed to be the daughter of Claudio and Olivia? Another repairman, Blair Jayapalan, may not have as much evidence pointing to him overwriting a deleted Sim, however it is highly likely considering he is also wedged between members of a playable family, and NPCs are usually generated after living Sims and their ancestors. An oddity I noticed that Blair shares with Seth is that their age data is pretty borged, and the game registers them as being 0 days old, plus they both have a basic set of cast memories. This is pretty odd considering townies and NPCs rarely have memories, but Seth and Blair's Mystery Sim memories are consistent with most of the Veronaville ancestors, a rarity in itself since most deceased Sims won't have memories, especially the premades in the base game hoods where they weren't intended to be played. Speaking of ancestors, Sims potentially overwriting deleted Sims character files is not just limited to living Sims. Much like how Kent Cap may have been deleted then recreated at a later stage in development, Bianca Monty, who was also one of the last created playable Sims, may have also undergone a similar process. The Sims wiki speculates that Cap ancestor Hamlet Dane Jr., the son of the power Sim with the same name, may have overwritten Bianca's original character file. His NID is user 11, between Isabella and Antonio Monty. General age inconsistencies aside, this lines up with Bianca being Patrizio and Isabella's first child. Moreover, this NID is referenced in playable Bianca's catalogue description, where the description reads, copied from Neighbourhood 3 user 11. This file is correct in-game, meaning Bianca's bio was copied over from her old NID, user 11, which now belongs to Hamlet Dane. Similarly, an early version of Bianca's bio appears in Hamlet's catalogue description in different languages. Something odd about Hamlet is that he has 11,500 aspiration points, which is unusual for a deceased sim, especially one who was intended to be a long deceased and never playable ancestor. This was hard to verify as Hamlet has no character file and I was unable to access his wants and fears, but the wiki also states he will want to have a baby, which is inconsistent with his own popularity aspiration but consistent with Bianca's family aspiration and final bio. Additionally, not only does Hamlet Dane have bad blood with Cap family members despite his son marrying into the family seemingly without drama, but he also has family ties to members of the Monty family that are consistent with Bianca's. Since this is not reflected in the family ties resource, Hamlet won't appear in the Monty family tree however. All in all, the evidence that Hamlet Dane overwrote a previous carnation of Bianca is pretty compelling. Finally, the strongest evidence for sim deletion can be found in the memories of deceased ancestors Hector Thebe and Scribonia and Octavius Cap. These sims all have a memory of an unknown sim's death. When clicked on, the image will be blank and the sim's name is Simoleon Sign Subject, which is exactly what happens to a memory that's supposed to point to a sim who's been deleted. Judging by the instance number, these memories will point to the same unknown sim, so they were probably another Cap ancestor. Because the memories reference data that no longer exists, they have become corrupted. What's especially worrying is that these sims also have a corresponding gossip memory for the death of this deleted sim. Even though gossip does not inherently cause corruption, it is a vehicle for corruption if the memory to which the gossip pertains is corrupted. In other words, gossip can spread corrupted memories around the hood. Hector has no character data and so he is unable to be resurrected. However, Scribonia and Octavius are not unlinked, thus they can be resurrected, making the spread of their corrupted memory even more possible. Although in my experience, Scribonia was the only one who functioned when resurrected, as Octavius was invisible and unable to do anything or interact with others, much like Seth Sadie in Strangetown. I know that was a lot to cover and I know I used the adverb finally, but there's actually even more evidence confirming sims were deleted to come when we run Veronaville through Hood Checker. But wait, there's more. Before we check the hood, here are some honourable or maybe dishonourable mentions. These are oddities that aren't corruption per se, but they add to Veronaville's mountain of balkage, so I wanted to briefly cover them. In some versions of the game, such as the Ultimate Collection, Patrizio and Isabella Monty's age data are pretty borked. Instead of showing how many sim days they have lived in total, their age bar will say they are 9 days old and 1 day old respectively. In actuality, these numbers should refer to how many days they have spent as an elder. Patrizio should be on his 10th day as an elder, having spent 9 days as an elder, whilst Isabella should be on her 2nd day as an elder, having spent 1 day as an elder. No idea how their age data got so borked, especially since this may not have been a problem in the base game. Speaking of age discrepancies, Scribonia and Octavius Cap apparently died of old age according to their ghosts. This is pretty odd since they both have the appearances of an adult and the game recognises them as such, and dying of old age is only available to elders. This may have been an oversight, or who knows, maybe this was an intentional throwback to the 16th century where people would die of old age at 25. Also check out Scribonia's teeth. The Sims Wiki states she has large teeth that may be noticeable even with a closed mouth and concludes that this is likely due to her data being changed a lot in development, kind of like Priam Albion's shape-shifting abilities or a less severe version of Cleopatra and Calpurnia's saber teeth. Ever noticed how no pop-up will appear when loading Cap Mana for the first time? That's because the lock contains an invisible token, preventing the game from running the scripted event. This can be easily fixed by removing the token in SimPE. Set SimPE to advanced mode in settings, and follow this tutorial by Pentower on Tumblr, and once you open Cap Mana in game, the scripted event should be reinstated. Lastly, for real this time, all Sims in the family bin have an unrecognized zodiac sign when viewed in SimPE. Once these Sims are initialized in game, their zodiac sign will line up with their personality, which explains why they don't have mismatched signs like most playable Sims, whose personalities may be inconsistent with their zodiac signs. Now we've covered pretty much everything broken in Veronaville, let's do the ultimate test to determine how balked it truly is. So as always, we are going to now run Veronaville through Hood Checker and see what it picks up and what it could potentially remove. So this is what I meant in the deleted sim section where I talked about further evidence being found in Hood Checker. These warnings don't show up in other pre-made hoods, so that's pretty strong evidence in my opinion that Veronaville's kind of Achilles heel is the deleted sims, the amount of deleted sims whose references are just sort of floating around, you know, and they're free real estate for any new created sim. But it picks up the dangling family ties. It's even picked up cases where both sims were deleted. It's picking up these, you know, phantom family ties, really. These are very problematic. You know, in the case of, you know, Cornwall Cap, Hamlet Dane, they exist, they're existing sims, and they have these references to deleted sims. They're referencing broken data. Quite a lot of the same sort of thing where the sims that don't exist have relationships with either other sims that don't exist or existing sims in the neighbourhood. And this is also some more evidence pointing towards sims being deleted and how their wants and fears are now just floating around, dangling. They could attach to newly created sims. And under memories, it's picking up the memory that Hector Thebe, Scribonia Cap and Octavius Cap all have, where they remember a sim who was probably deleted, no, not probably, but very likely to have been deleted based on the Simoleon subject memory, and it's picked that up. It's picked up the fact that the subject of this memory, it doesn't exist. They've been deleted. Sometimes Hood Checker can't actually penetrate memories, especially tricky ones where the subject isn't quite consistent or doesn't exist. So we'll see if it's able to clean that. I'm not 100% sure it can. I think it's something you'd have to do manually in SimPE. So it's able to remove the dangling family ties. It's able to remove these second sim does not exist references. Is able to remove the dangling sim wants and fears. And as for memories, as I suspected, it was not able to remove the corrupted memory that Hector, Scribonia and Octavius all have. You might be able to remove those memories in SimPE, but again, just think about is it worth it? While researching the deleted sim section, I found Mutilda say that the Hood Checker is probably your best bet when it comes to removing the sim references that SimPE cannot touch. There are a lot of things it can't fix, it can't fix the corrupted memory of the dead sim, the deleted sim rather. Well, they're dead and deleted. Pick a struggle. And it can't fix DNA problems. It can't fix a lot of the deceased sims problems with, corrupted faces. It can't reinstate Olivia's pregnancy. It can't fix Calpurnia and Cleopatra's tooth or their interesting genetics. It can't fix that. Yeah, but it's able to sort of clean up, at least as far as we can tell, the deleted Sims family ties and their wants and fears, and it's able to clear the invalid sim relationships with sims that don't exist, but it's not able to touch the memories of the deleted sim. Strangetown's reputation as the most corrupted premade hood may overshadow the other two base game hoods, but while Veronaville's corruption is underrated, it is no less iconic. If Strangetown was a testing ground, then Veronaville is perhaps even more so. From deleted Sims to scrapped aspirations, traces of development still linger in Veronaville, seemingly more so than any other hood. So what can you do? If you're already playing the Maxis Veronaville and you're too attached to start over, make sure you have all the necessary anti-corruption mods, use Hood Checker and make backups regularly, and of course avoid doing more VBTs. Though you may not be able to fix all the corruption already ingrained in the hood, you can prevent further corruption, mitigate corruption symptoms, and prolong the inevitable. But if you're desperate to delve into the lore of Veronaville, or if you're a huge Shakespeare fan like I am, it's advised to use a clean template. These cleaned versions have been scrubbed up and tested, and are a lot safer to play than the Maxis hoods. Meet Me to the River's clean Veronaville is the most popular, and on top of tackling the corruption, also corrects memories, reinstates Olivia and Monty's pregnancy, and adds complete character data to ancestors so they can be resurrected safely. Of course though, as with most of Meet Me to the River's clean templates, all the Veronaville townies and NPCs have been removed. Since Veronaville can get very related very quickly, often just after one generation, you may rely on townies and NPCs for genetic diversity. You could manually add all the townies and NPCs using SimPE, but this process is painstaking and tedious. Sunraider Sims did the hard work and uploaded a version of Meet Me to the River's clean Veronaville, complete with townies and NPCs. This is the version I've personally been using, and I recommend it if you want to play Veronaville with all the original townies and NPCs. If the genetic inconsistencies are the main reason why you've been hesitant to play Veronaville, check out this genetically correct Veronaville by Lord Crumps. Not only have the regular corruption problems and general discrepancies in memories and ages been addressed, but all the Sims are now genetically accurate. Now Veronaville can show off the full potential of The Sims 2's complex DNA system. Veronaville's stories, architecture, and Sims are a demonstration of The Sims 2 at its best, and it would be a shame to leave it unloaded. But instead of pondering whether to play or not to play, choose your favourite clean version, be just, and fear not. All the world's a neighbourhood and everyone merely simmers, so get playing. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for your patience waiting for this video. I know it took a lot longer than anticipated, but hey, I guess I wasn't lying when I said I don't think it will be uploaded in July. Seriously though, there was a lot to cover, and every time I thought I had everything, I'd find something new. Plus I'd been working on some other projects as well as dealing with the usual life things. It feels so good finally uploading this though, and I really feel like I'm in my element when I make these long informative videos about corruption, so I hope this was worth the wait, as I know a lot of you were waiting for this. I do have an obligatory thank you, but before you go, we've covered all 3 of the base game hoods and we're going to work our way through some sub hoods and all the EP hoods, but I wanted you to decide which hood comes next. So your options are proceeding to the next hood, which is downtown, the tutorial hood, or a more speculative video examining how corrupt scrapped hoods like Riverside or Waterside might have been. That will also focus more on the development side. Let me know in the comments what video you want to see next. I'll also be posting a poll on my page, so stay tuned for that. So I'll try to keep this brief since I did post on Twitter and on my community page, and I know this video is long enough already, but of course, thank you for 1,000 subscribers. This is life-changing and beyond anything I could have ever dreamed. I don't know what I did to deserve such a wonderful community, but I want you all to know that I wake up every single day feeling like I have a purpose now.
I'm just someone who loves this game and I want to inspire others to keep playing, and to know I've already achieved that in such a short amount of time means everything to me. You all mean everything to me. I wish I could just thank you all individually, but I hope expressing how grateful I am can suffice, and I wish you all a lifetime of happiness, joy and peace. I hope when you all wake up in the morning, you feel like you have a purpose too, because you do. Even though I want to just ramble about how valuable you all are and how excited I am for the future of this channel, I really should stop here because I have a feeling this will be my longest video yet. So to make it official, remember to stay safe, be good, and most of all, happy simming. Have an excellent week, and let's meet again in the next video. Bye!